The tension in the courtroom was palpable even before the proceedings began. Reporters from every major network had taken their places, lenses pointed, microphones prepped, and all eyes fixated on the double doors that would soon swing open. As murmurs echoed through the chamber, they were abruptly silenced when Elon Musk entered with a confident stride, dressed in a sharp black suit, his face unreadable but clearly prepared for a showdown. The hearing was scheduled to address new federal oversight proposals concerning AI development and data autonomy, issues Musk had publicly condemned as regressive and dangerous for innovation. Seated across the room behind a polished bench was Chief Justice John Roberts, his gaze locked in as Musk approached the table reserved for witnesses. Though composed, Roberts' body language hinted at the gravity of what was about to unfold. Legal aides shuffled papers nervously while the audience, which included tech experts, political figures, and even a few celebrities, waited in breathless anticipation. The court bailiff called the session to order, and as the cameras streamed live to millions watching from around the world, Musk took his seat. His legal team flanked him, but it was clear he intended to speak for himself. As the Chief Justice opened with procedural formalities, Musk leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, eyes fixed on the judges, exuding the quiet intensity of someone ready to disrupt the system. At first, the tone remained civil. Roberts outlined the goals of the hearing, stressing the importance of legal accountability in emerging technologies. But just a few minutes in, Musk raised his hand, not to ask permission, but to interrupt. He started by saying he respected the court but believed it was operating under a framework that has failed to evolve with the very technologies it seeks to regulate. The courtroom stiffened. Roberts didn't respond immediately. Instead, he nodded for Musk to continue, giving him just enough rope to see where it would lead. Musk went on, criticizing the court's lack of technical literacy and suggesting that its decisions were influenced more by fear than facts. Several reporters began typing furiously, realizing this was no ordinary testimony. Roberts' face tightened, his hands folded atop the desk, unmoving. The silence that followed Musk's comments seemed to stretch forever. Then came a sharp, pointed reply from the Chief Justice, asking Musk if he intended to participate in a legal hearing or deliver a TED Talk. The courtroom reacted with muted laughter from some, and stunned silence from others. What began as a formal proceeding was now clearly spiraling into something else entirely, something raw, unscripted, and deeply personal. Elon Musk didn't flinch after the Chief Justice's jab. In fact, he leaned forward, placing both hands firmly on the table in front of him, and responded with a calm but pointed tone, "With all due respect, Mr. Chief Justice, when laws are used to suppress innovation instead of protect society, someone has to say it out loud." His words echoed through the courtroom, and a hush fell over the crowd. No one dared to interrupt. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every expression, every flicker of tension between two titans from completely different worlds, one governing the laws of the land, the other pushing the limits of science and technology. Then, without warning, Musk's calm demeanor gave way to frustration. He rose from his seat and began addressing the bench directly, without waiting for permission. "You cannot legislate the future from a place of fear," he declared, his voice rising just enough to stir murmurs among the audience. Roberts' eyes narrowed as Musk continued, "You sit here passing judgment on systems and algorithms you do not understand, advising on breakthroughs you have never built, and it's killing progress." Some of the justices exchanged glances, visibly caught off guard. A court officer subtly stepped forward from the wall, sensing the moment could spiral out of control. The room's energy shifted entirely. Musk's tone, now tinged with fire, cut through the formal atmosphere like a blade. "We are being asked to wait, to slow down, while the rest of the world races ahead. Do you not realize the risk in falling behind?" he said, almost pleading, though still defiant. One of the associate justices raised a hand as if to object, but Musk was in full stride, rolling into a monologue that mixed warning with condemnation. He criticized the regulatory bodies for being archaic gatekeepers, who fear what they can't control. A few spectators gasped. Journalists exchanged looks of disbelief, their phones buzzing with live alerts from social media. Musk then uttered a phrase, almost under his breath but caught by a hot mic, that made jaws drop: "This court is part of the problem." For a brief second, even Roberts looked taken aback. That phrase hung in the air like a thunderclap. Everyone heard it. The statement wasn't just bold, it was confrontational, a direct challenge to the authority of the highest legal seat in the country. Roberts' gavel hit the block hard, once, then twice. "Mr. Musk, you are dangerously close to contempt," he said, his voice low but edged with steel. But Elon wasn't done. He threw his hands up and said, "If telling the truth is contempt, then so be it." It wasn't just the content of Musk's words that shocked the room, it was the conviction behind them. He wasn't bluffing or showboating, he genuinely believed in every word he spoke. And for a split second, the courtroom didn't know how to respond. Was this the speech of a visionary refusing to be shackled by outdated systems, or a billionaire crossing the line into chaos? Cameras panned to the audience where some nodded quietly in agreement while others looked visibly disturbed. The live chat feeds on YouTube and Twitter were exploding. Phrases like, "Musk drops the hammer," and "courtroom revolution," were trending globally within minutes. But inside those wood-paneled walls, the atmosphere had transformed from legal formality to a volatile standoff. And it was clear, this wasn't going to end with just words. Chief Justice John Roberts, typically known for his calm, measured approach, no longer seemed composed. He stood abruptly, the sound of his chair scraping against the floor cutting through the tense silence. Every eye in the courtroom was on him now, as the power dynamic shifted in an instant. The room held its collective breath, waiting to see how Roberts, the embodiment of legal authority, would respond to the high-tech mogul sitting before him, challenging the very foundations of the court. "Mr. Musk," Roberts began, his voice carrying a note of finality, "you've crossed a line." The words weren't shouted, but they carried the weight of a command, a reprimand that would make anyone feel the gravity of the moment. The room, once filled with hushed murmurs of anticipation, was now completely still. Every reporter, every tech giant in attendance, and every person glued to the livestream could feel the tension rising. Musk, still standing, appeared unfazed by the shift in tone. He squared his shoulders, almost daring Roberts to escalate things further. The Chief Justice's eyes locked on Musk's, and for a brief moment, there was a palpable understanding between the two men, a silent acknowledgement that neither was willing to back down. Roberts' next words were slow, deliberate, each syllable punctuated with an intensity that made it clear this would not be a casual reprimand. "Mr. Musk, this is a court of law, not a platform for grandstanding or to push your personal agenda. Your comments, while bold, are reckless and disrespectful to the very institution you claim to care so much about. We are here to examine legal matters, not to have a public spectacle of your views on innovation." He paused, allowing the words to sink in. The camera zoomed in on Musk, who for the first time, showed a flicker of uncertainty. He took a half step back, but then quickly regained his composure. The look in his eyes was defiant, unyielding, as if he were determined to make his point regardless of the consequences. "I'm not here to grandstand, Mr. Roberts. I'm here to point out that if we don't evolve, we risk becoming obsolete. The world is changing faster than any legislation can keep up with," Musk shot back, his tone still firm but laced with frustration. His words hung heavy in the room, and many couldn't help but nod in agreement. Yet, there was something more profound in the air now, a realization that Musk wasn't just presenting an argument, he was challenging the very authority that had shaped the legal landscape of the country for decades. Roberts, visibly agitated but not willing to show weakness, responded with a sharp retort. "We are not concerned with the pace of change, Mr. Musk. We are concerned with ensuring that technology serves society, not the other way around. Innovation should never come at the cost of ethical responsibility or the public good." His voice grew colder, and it was clear he was drawing a hard line. At this point, the rest of the court had fallen silent, the other justices watching with rapt attention. Even the lawyers representing both sides had ceased speaking, unsure of how to navigate this growing conflict. The tension was so thick it felt as if the entire building had come to a halt, each breath held, waiting to see who would blink first. Musk's expression remained steadfast, but there was a subtle change in his demeanor. He was no longer just a businessman defending his empire, he was now a visionary, a man fighting for what he believed was the future of humanity. The weight of his words hung over the room as he said, "With all due respect, Chief Justice, you're missing the point. The world isn't waiting for bureaucracy to catch up. We're at the precipice of a new age, and if we keep stifling that progress, we'll be left behind." For the first time, Roberts seemed to waver, his jaw tightening as he struggled to maintain control. The audience felt it too, a shift from the unflappable authority of the Chief Justice to a man now clearly caught in the crosshairs of a debate that had gone far beyond legalese and courtroom formalities. Yet, Roberts was not one to back down. With a look of steely determination, he slammed his gavel onto the table, the sound reverberating across the room. "Mr. Musk, I warned you," he said, his voice steely and unyielding. "This behavior will not be tolerated in my courtroom. If you cannot conduct yourself with respect for the law and the institution, then you will be removed. The force of his words settled in, and for a moment, even Musk seemed to pause, as if the seriousness of the situation had just hit him. But before he could react, Roberts spoke again, his voice rising with the authority of the highest office in the land. I will not let you turn this court into a circus. Either you adhere to the rules, or you will be escorted out. The tension between them reached a breaking point, the stakes now raised higher than ever. The crowd waited with bated breath, the live cameras capturing every second of the confrontation. Would Musk push back further? Or was this the moment where the future of tech and law collided in an irreversible way? The room was on the edge of its seat, waiting to see how it would end. The atmosphere in the courtroom became charged with a tense electricity as Chief Justice Roberts' command reverberated through the chamber. A heavy silence followed, as if the room was collectively bracing for what would come next. For a split second, it seemed like the situation might de-escalate. Musk, still standing with his hands planted firmly on the table, paused and surveyed the room, his sharp gaze sweeping over the faces of the justices and the audience. It was clear he wasn't backing down. In fact, it almost seemed like he was preparing for an even bigger clash. His jaw clenched and his eyes narrowed, but there was no retreat in his stance. The air was thick with the sense that something monumental was about to unfold. Without further hesitation, the court officers, who had been standing at the edges of the room, began moving towards the table. Their uniforms, crisp and imposing, were a stark contrast to the informal chaos that had now unfolded in the courtroom. The audience, who had been silently observing up until now, could feel the impending drama. Phones buzzed as social media lit up in real time, reporting live on the escalating situation. It wasn't just a court case anymore, it was the kind of spectacle that people would talk about for years. One officer, a tall man with a calm but authoritative presence, approached Musk's side of the table. Musk barely looked at him, his focus fixed firmly on Roberts. But when the officer gently placed his hand on Musk's shoulder, it broke the tense silence. Musk turned to look at him briefly, his expression unreadable. The officer gave a small nod, a gesture meant to communicate that the time for words had passed. The room collectively held its breath, wondering if Musk would resist. What would happen if he did? The officer's presence was an undeniable signal. This was no longer a discussion, it had become a matter of authority. And then, Musk did something that shocked everyone. He stood there, unmoving, and his mouth twitched into a half-smile. Was he trying to assert his dominance in the situation? Or was he taking a final stand for his beliefs? No one could say for certain. But the moment felt loaded with unspoken defiance. The officer's hand lingered a moment longer, before he quietly spoke, his voice low but firm, Mr. Musk, you need to leave the courtroom. The words were simple, but they held a weight that made everyone in the room tense up. The stakes had just been raised even higher. This wasn't just about a legal argument anymore, it was about Musk being forcibly removed from one of the highest courts in the land. A challenge to his authority, and perhaps, a challenge to everything he stood for. Musk stood still for a few seconds, as though weighing his options, his eyes never leaving the Chief Justice. It was as though he were calculating his next move in this high-stakes game, considering the impact of his decision not just on the courtroom, but on the millions watching from the outside. And then, in a move that stunned even the most seasoned observers, Musk broke the silence with a quiet but deliberate response. I won't be silenced. His voice was cool, but there was an unmistakable fire behind the words. It wasn't a plea or an apology, it was a statement of his resolve. As the words left his mouth, the officer stepped forward, his presence unwavering. Musk finally seemed to acknowledge the reality of the situation. There would be no more words exchanged. No more chance to make his case or prove his point. The time for speeches was over. With a last glance at Roberts, Musk slowly rose from his chair. The cameras, poised and ready, captured every moment. The officer made his move, placing a hand on Musk's elbow to guide him away from the table. The crowd stirred as the reality of the moment set in. Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur and self-proclaimed disruptor of industries, was being escorted out of the room, just as Roberts had ordered. The tension was palpable as the officer and Musk moved toward the exit. The hum of whispers and murmurs began to swell, punctuated by the sound of footsteps echoing in the otherwise silent chamber. The audience couldn't believe what they were witnessing. The very symbol of Silicon Valley defiance, a man who had upended industries and policies with a mere tweet, was now being escorted from the courtroom like a common criminal. As the door closed behind him, cutting off the view of Musk's retreating figure, the room was left in stunned silence. The justices exchanged uncertain glances, unsure of how to proceed in the aftermath of what had just occurred. The entire room had been witness to something that went far beyond a legal argument. This wasn't just a courtroom, it had become a battleground of ideas, of generations, of worlds colliding in a single, unforgettable moment. The cameras lingered on the empty seat where Musk had just been. In a matter of moments, the live feed had exploded on social media. Musk kicked out of court, was trending across platforms, and people began flooding into the comment sections, speculating on what had led to the clash and what this moment might mean for the future of tech regulation. Musk's supporters and detractors alike were quick to share their thoughts, turning the court's proceedings into an instant viral spectacle. As the room settled back into its rhythm, the justices had no choice but to proceed with the hearing. But the tension was palpable. The damage had been done. The court had been forever changed by the event, and the world was watching. What was meant to be a routine legal hearing had been transformed into a defining moment in the ongoing battle between law, politics, and innovation.